All right, Matt, here's your sound spike.
It's perfect.
All right, episode 17, one day post Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's been good. Been a nice little get together here. Been wild with all the kids running around, Rooster running around.
Been lots of fun yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone came to our house in Fairfield, and you guys stayed the night, and here we are recording one day after.
Oh man, it's been so the last episode I think we spoke a lot. I feel like I spoke a lot, maybe too much, on the ice road. But just because of your fugue state, did you get to go back and listen to the fugue? It wasn't too bad.
What do you mean? What episode? I thought the last one was the prison one.
There you go. Oh man, I have to do this follow up because you guys, first of all, we'll welcome in Rooster. We got him down. We got him in here again. And this will be his first time on the camera with you guys for YouTube. And I know that the YouTube community loves to see old man Rooster.
I don't know about that.
No, they do. They comment on it. They're like, forget you. In fact, I think the last video I put out, they said something along the lines of, as soon as you in Alabama start creating your own channel, I'll be long left in the dust. She was my camera gal on the last episode we put out, and she did a good job. But the fugue state, as I've trucked this last week, it brought back some memories and some things. In fact, something that just happened this last fall. I've got to share this story, and maybe Rooster will. As I share this, it might bring back some fond or not so fond memories. But
really quickly, anyone who wonders what Jackson's talking about, fugue state, I'm still not totally clear on it, but he somewhat explained it.
Okay,
the previous episode.
Yeah.
So if this is the first time you've ever listened to us, or you skipped episode 16, you can either Google what fugue state means, or go back and listen to the previous episode. And Jackson somewhat explains it. Do you ever watch Arrested Development?
Yeah.
Do they talk about fugue state on there? Is that just the name of that brother-in-law?
Oh,
David Cross plays him.
Yeah. Funke is his last name.
I don't know why I was
Yeah.
I gotta go back and watch that series. For some reason, I'm thinking there's a fugue state joke in there.
There could be.
All right.
That might be the original fugue. So the fugue is when you're so tired, wore out, you're just kind of out of it. You're there, you're functioning, you're holding down the fort, but not really anything beyond just holding down the fort. That's about all you're doing.
I think the fugue state, physically you're still good.
Yeah.
But mentally you've reached your limit. And
Yeah.
You're not thinking too clear.
So I had this young fella from Idaho, young cattle trucker, reached out to me this last, kind of over the course of the summer through Instagram, started messaging. And the reason that I took this guy under my wing is because he actually listened to me. So he started sending me messages, and he said, hey, I'm a young guy, fresh to the trucking scene. I want to haul cows. I have an old truck, and I have this old trailer, and I really like to get going. What should I do? And so I had told him, and this is kind of a stretch to tell somebody because it's a situation that's uncomfortable if you actually follow through with it. But I told him, I said, okay, go to your local sale barn and sit there at the beginning of the sale and start watching all these cattle buyers and just figure out who's the players, like who in the room who's the guys. And once you start figuring out who's the guys, go sit down next to one of them, and at the right moment, not in the middle when they're bidding, but when there's a little break in the sale, introduce yourself, tell them who you are, tell them you have a truck and you have a trailer and you really want to haul cows, and see what they say. And if they say yes, I'll load you, great. If they don't, go to the next guy. Go to all the guys. And so he messages me back a couple weeks later, and he did this. He's like, I went in and I did it. I got some loads. And I was like, oh, this is great, because this is the whole hard part of trucking is loads. I mean, the trucking part is easy compared to the business side of things, finding the work. So because he did this and he started following my recommendations, I was willing to, feed him some more. You get so many messages. People were like, what do you think I should do? And you're like, do this. And they're like, oh, nah, I already did that. And you're like, no, you didn't. Because if you had, you wouldn't be messaging me this right now. So you didn't do what I asked or what I suggested. And I mean it in a nice way, but it's like, don't waste my time with questions if you're not going to, follow through. But this guy did. So he gained a little soft spot in my heart and kind of brings back the good old memories of when I was a fresh budding trucker.
Can we stop right here?
Stop.
'Cause I've got a lot of stuff that's coming to mind with this.
Mm-hmm.
First off, at the auction, find out who the players are.
Uh-huh.
Roost, you go to the sale auction in Lewistown, cattle auction, almost every week, don't you?
I do most of the time, yeah.
How do you know who the players are in there? What would be the suggestion if someone's listening to this and wants to follow Jackson's suggestions or advice?
He can tell within a few minutes between the byplay between the auctioneer and the main buyers. They're encouraging them and telling them these are the cattle that'll fit their loads, and very shortly you can find the 2 or 3 guys that are buying most of the cattle.
How would you know? What would you see?
If you watch the auctioneer's eyes, he's, like Rooster said, he's actually talking to like 3 people in the room. He's saying stuff to everybody, but he's actually looking at these certain buyers, telling them, hey, this cow will fit, that deal that you're bidding on. So if you watch the auctioneer's eyes and see who's he looking at over there when he's saying these things, and then follow, once the bidding starts, you'll see these little hand motions. And it's not much with cattle buyers, but you'll either see some little nods or just a little flick of the wrist, and that's how you'll be able to.
So when you go to these sales, there's generally just a few people that are buying the vast majority of the cattle coming through the sales.
Right. Yep. So
I asked for your advice on something recently, and I did the opposite.
You did the opposite of my advice?
I'm wondering if you're going to give me any suggestions or advice.
Why didn't you do my advice?
Well, because I had already taken the action before I asked you about it.
Oh, was this on the chains and the... No?
Close. Airbags.
Okay.
I have a truck that with a heavier trailer, it sinks a little bit.
Squats.
And I had been looking at an in-bed truck camper for some different things that we could utilize a camper for. And I was talking to the manufacturer of this, and they said, we recommend everybody puts these specific airbags on their trucks with the camper, that we find it helps support the camper a lot better. And so I had talked to the local dealership and ordered them. They're already ordered and paid for. And then I asked you what I thought about airbags.
That was kind of a dirty trick. So then, of course, what was my response?
Response was, well, they don't do nothing. They make you look cool, but don't do nothing.
Now, just for all you listening out there with airbags in your truck already, they will help. Just in a 1-ton pickup, I don't feel like they're really going to do a lot for you.
I will say that, well, they're on it, and I've used them. They're installed. They're done. Yeah.
Have you hauled a load big enough to squat your pickup without the airbags?
Yes.
Pre-airbag.
Yes.
And it did squat.
Well, here's the thing I know, because when the air is out of them, when you air them up, you see the whole load, the whole truck lift up.
Right. Here's the true way if you want to know, actually. I should have just told you this. I should have said, hook your trailer on, put a load on, and go drive at night. And if you get oncoming cars flashing their brights at you while your dims are on, put the airbags on. If nobody flashes their lights at you, don't worry about it. What I mean is if you're driving down the road and you got a little squat and your dim lights are on, it shines them up in everyone's eyes and everyone flashes their brights at you going down the 2-lane roads. You're like, dude, it's my dims. But that squat just changes the angle of those headlights enough to make everyone think that your dims are bright. And so that's the true test.
I have done that not with the airbags.
Uh-huh.
And I've been flashed just a couple months ago.
Okay, so there's your answer then.
I got someone upset with me. I had my brights on behind them recently, and then when I came up on it, they'd slowed way down, and I passed them, and they were gesturing out their window pretty wildly at me because I'd have my brights right on. But to be fair, they had no taillights.
Oh.
And they were right behind a semi that had all its headlights on and all its trailer lights. And so I could see that coming up. All I could see was the semi because it was way up higher.
You couldn't even see the car. Yeah.
Couldn't see the car. So, but he was between me and the semi, and I was far enough behind the semi that it was not inappropriate to have brights on. And so I was coming, as I came up on the semi, then all of a sudden, wow, there's this car in front of me with no taillights.
So it wasn't like you were being a jerk. You just couldn't see that there was a car there. He was swallowed up in the lights.
I contemplated passing him and slowing way down and trying to get him to stop so I could say, hey, your taillights are out. But he was pretty animated, so I figured I'd just
he would have listened. Yeah.
go ahead and head down the road. So if you decide to gesture someone wildly as they pass you because their brights are on behind you, make sure that your taillights first are working, and second, that you're not behind a semi who's completely drowning your vehicle out.
A lot of things to consider here before you start the hand gestures. Usually hand gestures need to be a last resort.
So anyway, I hope you will give me advice in the future, even though I didn't follow your airbag ones, because I had already already placed the order for them when I asked you about them.
To be fair, it wasn't necessarily a trucking question. It was more of a,
Life question?
Yeah, more of a life thing.
And I did ask you about chains this week, too, on pickups. And you advised not to.
That's been my experience, although then I watched Heavy D's latest video, and they had to chain their pickup up to get up in the mountains. And you go to the mountains a lot, so.
I've had some situations where I would have appreciated chains in the mountains.
Luke was wondering about getting chains for his four-wheel drive pickup. Have you ever chained up your four-wheel drive ever?
I never have, but
you have been stuck many a time. Yeah,
I have chained once, and if you get chained up and stuck, then you're in bad
That is
trouble.
one thing about it. It's not false security, but it can get you places
If
where...
you get stuck without chains, you can usually dig out or back out. If you get stuck with chains, then you might as well call for the helicopter.
It's true. Remember we were talking about a false sense of security a while ago?
Chains will do that.
Chains will get you into... They will get you where you need to go. Whether
so
it's
my
a
reason
snowdrift.
for it is the past couple of years I have gotten almost stranded up in the mountains where I would have appreciated chains to get me out of the situation, not to let me
Go
adventure further into the situation.
There you go.
That's the reason I want them is if I do get a little jammed up, it allows me to get out.
Yep, that's
That's what chains are for. They're to get out, not to get in.
Not to get further into the situation. All right, so that really sidetracked there. Let's get back to your story.
So back to the fugue situation. Okay, so this kid's been listening to my instructions, so naturally he's gained a little place at my side, and he hit me up later this fall later in the summer, excuse me, and he says, "Do you got any work you're gonna have going up in Montana?" And I did. I had like 40 loads going from western Montana, which is far. I mean, it's way out there, western Montana, down to eastern Nebraska. These runs are like anywhere from 1,100 to 1,200 miles, kind of depending where we load at. Long runs, like really long runs. And when I started trucking, I kind of eased in, started locally and then graduated up and then took my first load to Colorado, which was like 600 miles, and then, stair-step my way. But he'd been listening so well, and he's been doing so good that I thought, I'm gonna hook him up with these loads. Because with the fuel rates being so high, I mean, these are like $7,000-$8,000 loads. I mean, big deals. This kid had also purchased one of my old trailers. So I'd sold him a trailer. He's listening to my advice. He's asking to come help. So I'm like all in. I'm all in on this guy. So I set him up to run with a couple of my older horses, a couple of my seasoned veterans, so they can kind of show him along. Show
a little
him
mentorship.
Yeah, mentorship, like we talked. And he did great. They loaded the cattle. He followed these guys all the way down. If anything, they said maybe he followed a little too close. And I remember this first time you follow someone into an unknown zone as a young trucker. Like, you're scared to death you're going to lose their tail lights because you're like, they're going to turn and I'm not even going to know where I'm going. So I remember old Hank called me and he's like, well, Wyatt's doing good. He's really sticking with me. So he's like a car length off his truck bumper the whole way to Nebraska. So anyway, they get down there, and usually, we load, let's just say on a Monday morning, or usually Monday afternoon, actually. You drive all day, all night, you get down to Nebraska by noon the next day. And most of us, because we've done this a lot in a long time, once we get unloaded, Tuesday, we'll fuel up, and we'll kick up the road for a while, get our trailers washed out, and go to bed, 300-400 miles back towards home. And old Wyatt, he was pretty whooped. So he pulls in, he fuels up in the town that we unload, Norfolk, Nebraska, and or as the locals say, Norfolk, and he parks his truck and does this was the cardinal sin of cow trucking. He zipped his curtains closed and turned his sleeper into a cave. You can totally black out your sleeper, pure cave mode. So this is what he does, and he sleeps. And he sleeps. And I mean, bless his little heart. It's his first time on the road. And he did good getting down there. So sure. Sleep. But you have to be strategic because you have to get towards home somewhat or you're not going to make it back in time for your next load out, which is in 2 days. So you have 2 days to get back home now. 1 day to get down, 2 days to get good rest and get back home. Well, anyway, I don't want to bother him. So I call him the next day. And I'm like, how's it going, man? And he goes, well... And that's been kind of interesting. I said, what do you mean? Like, just, it's a lot? Well, yeah, I mean, it was a lot, but I got down there. I did okay. He goes, I had a little problem. I said, well, what was that? He goes, I woke up in the truck stop. And I'm like, well, you mean like you went to sleep in the truck stop and woke up there? He's like, no, I woke up inside of the truck stop, in the building, inside, not in my truck. And I'm like, dude, you gotta tell me more about this. He goes, I really don't have any. All I remember is waking up, talking on the phone at the cashier to my wife. And that's when I realized, like, I snapped out of it and was like, oh, what's going on? So he had gone to sleep, shut the curtains, and he woke up at some point and unzipped his curtains, put his pants on, had like an undershirt on, but didn't put his shirt on, and pulled his boots on, over his pants, and went wandering out of his truck through the parking lot into the truck stop. And apparently was just wandering up and down the aisles, just kind of like zombie. Enough to where people were like the attendant in the truck stop, like, stopped him and was like, are you okay, sir? Are you having an emergency? No. I told him I was fine. And so they said, do you have an emergency contact we can call for you? Because they could tell he was not. Like, something was wrong. So they call. He gives his wife's number, and he just stands there at the counter, asleep. And they put his wife on the phone, and she's like, honey, are you okay? And he finally, oh, man, I just woke up in the truck stop. So he did the full fugue wandering. And So he goes, I think I'll be okay in the future. I'm like, and of course now I'm like, like, I can't have you wandering off. Like, what if you're loaded and you just wander out into the cornfield or something? Like, is that a thing? He's like, no, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I've sleptwalked a little in the past. I have a little history of sleepwalking. I'm like, do you need to, like, chain yourself to the sleeper? Or, but I offered to him as some advice. I said, if you ever haul in cattle and you go to sleep during the day, and you can't sleep for the full 8 or 10 hours, don't ever close your curtains, because you will fall into the deepest dark slumber. It could be 1 PM and you will just... And that's what he did. So I said, next time leave your curtains open. That way the sunlight will kind of help. If you wake up and start getting dressed, the sunlight should wake you up before... I think he got dressed in the dark and everything in his sleeper and then wandered out. So it brought back some pretty good memories, because I've had one myself where, and it's always in the early days as you become more of a veteran and you get used to running, this kind of goes away. But in the early days, I was taking a short nap on the side of the road, and this truck, the sleeper, was right up next to the front seat. I mean, they were like butted up, real small truck. And I took my little nap and I woke up and didn't know where I was. But you have like this reoccurring nightmare as a young trucker where you think your truck is rolling away. And so I woke up and was just sure my truck was rolling away. So I come out of this little slumber, jump from the sleeper into the driver's seat, kick the brake as hard as I can, thinking my truck's rolling away. Of course it's not. It's just sitting there on the side of the road idling, and just heart pounding. And then you're just like, where am I? What's going And then you're like, oh, okay. I'm okay. My truck is not rolling away. I'm okay. I'm here. And you just got to take a minute to to let it settle. Have you ever had any of this stuff happen to you?
I've had that happen 4 or 5 times, and sometimes I'm going down this steep mountain road, and each corner that comes up, I'm sure I'm going over.
This is like
This
your
is the
dream.
I'm
dream.
asleep. I'm
Okay,
dreaming
this is
it.
your dream.
And then I wake up like you and clamber for the steering wheel. But I found the only way to get away, every time I'd sleep in the truck, I'd just have this mantra going in my head saying, I am parked at the side of the road. I am sleeping. I am not loaded. There is no problem. I am going to sleep. And then I fall asleep, and then that kind of took care of it. But it's more frightful. That's the most horrible experience ever to wake up.
Do you know the positive affirmation thing that got real big for a while? Kind of everyone was like, I am kind. I am smart. I am beautiful. I am strong. I am good. Like positive. You have to like do that. I am parked. I am safe. My cattle are good. I'm sleeping. Oh man, yeah. You get into some zones out there where you just get a little like, yeah. You remember any of your other ones?
I remember several of them, but I remember one time me and Billy Jack were coming back.
That's a trucker name right there.
Yeah,
Billy
he's
Jack.
a guy that I kind of mentored. We call him Billy Jack because of several jackknife situations in his beginning days.
So, what's the jackknife situation? Just so people know.
That's when you're on slick roads and the trailer kind of comes up alongside you.
It's where you basically kink your truck and your trailer get kinked.
Like a jackknife.
Like a jackknife.
He folded like a... But anyway.
Billy Jack. This is a tremendous nickname.
I'm coming from Billings to Harlowtown, and I see Bill parked at Harlowtown. There's a nice wide turnout there, but he got his truck off the road into the safe part, but his trailer was clear out blocking the entire road. So I had to pull around, and I went in. I had to beat on his door for 10 minutes to get him awake. I said, Bill, you need to pull up a few more feet. So I got him woke up, and he was just totally out of it. He pulled up about 30 feet and then went back to sleep.
That just reminded me of one more story I got to share now. I had another guy that I brought on. He's a farmer from around where we live, and he was looking for a way to kind of subsidize the farm a little bit, make a little extra money on the side. So he started hauling cows with us, and the guy can truck. I mean, he does great, just rock and roll. But his one little weakness is once we get to where we're going, he'll take his little nap and get up, and you've never seen someone look more like walking death. You're just like, oh, you can go back to bed. Like, why don't you go get a little more sleep? He'd come out of the sleeper just like, and I mean, rough. And I mean, we're all rough, but old Paul just really was rough. And so we all traveled to the trailer washout one day. We'd unloaded. We're driving back. We find a washout. So there's like 4 of us trucks, and we all pull in there. And of course, one guy's washing, the other 3 guys are napping. So then once the one guy pulls out, he'll go and start napping while the next guy. So you just kind of take turns washing your trailers and napping, tuk, 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 so we can all travel together. And this was pretty mean. This was pretty low, but I knew Paul was sleeping in a sleeper. And a little mistake. If you're ever traveling with some buddies, always lock your doors when you take a nap. Don't ever leave your doors unlocked, because you'll get punked. So all the other 3 or 4 of us gathered together and silently slipped into Paul's truck. So he's just just conked, and we sneak into his truck, open his door, and we all gather around in a sleeper into like a half moon and just look down on him. And then we go, Paul. And he wakes up. And just the look of, he's just like, he couldn't breathe. To the point where we're like, all right, guys, get out. Get out. It's too much. He can't take it. Like, he's going to die. So then Paul, in the fugue state, anyway, he survived. Gave him a little jump start. But weren't you running down to Sheridan one time? You had a little moment, little confusion.
Well, I had in the fall, I'd have this load where I'd buy 1,000 boars and go east with them. But in the fall, I'd haul a couple loads of cattle.
So your regular gig, yeah, just as a reminder, your regular gig every week was pigs from
Fairfield to Sioux Falls.
Okay, but in
912 miles.
Yeah, 912,
yeah.
Right on the nose. But in the fall, there's a huge need for trucks, and so
I'd pick up a couple loads of cattle and go to Torrington, Wyoming.
Do you guys go to Torrington anymore?
No.
Because I remember growing up, it was always, Torrington was The word of the day during the fall for
Yeah,
us.
no, he was hauling them right to the sale barn, to the guy then to the sale barn. But no, that guy sold the yards and
Yeah, he died, and the main buyer that bought for him in Montana, he got old and passed away too. But still a big going market there.
yeah, big yards,
market.
but they don't take in cattle like we used to do. So anyway, you're on your way down.
So I'm going to Sioux Falls with a load of sows, and I mean, I'm physically, I've had my sleep, I'm feeling good, and all of a sudden I see the with scale exit, and I think I'm expecting to be at that port of entry at Whitewood, South Dakota, and the sign looks a little weird, and then I realize it's a different port of entry sign. So I pull off on the side road. I have no idea where I am. So I thought, oh, what am I doing? So I got out of the truck and was just walking around trying to figure out what's going on. And then I heard some cattle beller in my trailer. I realized that I was hauling cattle to Torrington Nut Hogs to Sioux Falls.
So in your mind, you're going,
yeah,
you're
everything
looking for
cleared,
pigs.
cleared right up.
Yep.
That was weird.
Yeah, it's weird as an adult to literally not know where you are at times where you're just like, wait a minute, haven't I gone? What? But you're not sleepy. Like, you're not like, it's not like, I'm going to fall asleep and run off the road. It's not like that. You're just like,
I mean, I had my groove on.
Yeah.
I was ready to go all
Ready
night.
to
And
roll.
all of a sudden, I don't even know where I'm at.
just have this moment where you're like, huh. So this is the real living fugue that can happen. Just the mental taxation.
When you're talking about pranks, I don't know what brought this to my mind this week. Was there a truck stop or a place in South Dakota you used to go where there were a couple guys that ran it that were always doing pranks? I feel like maybe
Oh, yeah.
running electricity through the counter where you check
Yeah.
out, or maybe they put
What
a
was
guy in a
that? I remember
freezer to
this
pretend
too.
he was dead to scare one of the delivery guys. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
It was like right at the edge of my memory this week, and I meant to ask you about that.
It was these were some of my exotic friends, and one of them also ran a...
Wait, you're exotic. Now, when you say exotic friends, you got to kind of expound that. Just
That raise exotic animals.
so,
Yeah, Wendy, I mean, like, some people that raise exotic animals.
so hearkening back to the Joe Exotic, these were Dad's exotic animal, guys he'd trade exotic animals and buy from and go to sales with. So harken back to the Tiger King to try to get back into the mode of what these guys were like. Now carry on.
Yeah, they had one of the...
Where at in South Dakota was it?
It was Puckwana.
Puckwana, South Dakota.
Yeah, and I hate to mention any names specifically,
It's okay.
but one of them managed this little scenic station there, so I'd pull in there, almost weekly, and they'd always have a card game going, and they'd always have some kind of prank going. And one of them, they had an old guy a vendor that filled their candy machine, and they had a freezer, an old freezer that the lid wouldn't close. They had a big rock on it to hold it down. He'd fill that with ice cream bars and stuff. Okay. One day he came in, and one of them crawled in the freezer, and they put a bunch of frost, put it all over his body, so he's laying there in that freezer. And this poor old guy opens up the freezer to restock the ice cream, and sees one of these guys laying there, and he kind of let out a shriek, and he started going backwards and fell over the candy machine and left, and they never saw him again. He never came back again to service their candy.
And that's how I felt with Paul when we all snuck in his truck. I was like, oh, it was too much. It was too much. Yeah, I shouldn't have done that one. But Paul came back. Paul kept trucking.
Oh.
That was only one of the minor pranks those guys pulled.
Wasn't there... What was the bathroom? They had the bathroom rigged up.
Oh, didn't they have
With
it
the
on the
syringe
urinal somewhere along there?
Just on the toilet, they'd ran a clear hose from the outside down behind the toilet and circled it, and then had it pointing straight at your crotch. So when you're sitting there whizzing, they put a cattle syringe on that hose on the outside and give it a little push. And you think that you didn't have everything lined up quite right and that you wet yourself a little. And so I did that one time. Oh, man, how did I do that? So I had my shirt. I untucked my shirt and let it hang down.
I mean, what's so great is these guys literally have to go, oh, someone's in the bathroom. So they're running.
Hurry.
Running by. They're running to wherever the syringe is to make sure to give it
A squirt.
And so I walk out there and I go, oh, what happened? Just so those guys were nuts.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, I miss that kind of stuff. That's some good old boy stuff right there.
Yeah.
Man, South Dakota back in the 80s and 90s had some of the greatest little truck stop spots, just little.
One other one, they came in, they said, we're trying to figure out a way to make a little more money, so we're starting to do these goose calls. So they had some weird contraption, a bunch of pipes circled, and it had a little trumpet end on it to blow on. And they said, try and see how you think it sounds. So I give it a big blow, and they had it full of flour. And the final thing, so you blow on this little trumpet end, you just get covered in fluff. I mean, these guys spend all their time, and there's many more pranks, you guys. This is only a few of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, those were good old days. I remember there was a little truck stop in Kimball, South Dakota. The owner, he really liked Rooster, and Dad always had us kids with him. And I remember that was the first dollar I ever made gambling. Was the guy had me sit there on the chair, and he put some money in and kept telling me what to push. I was probably 6. I don't know. I just pushing buttons and boop, get my dollar. It was my first and only dollar I've ever made gambling.
Kimball, South Dakota.
Kimball, South Dakota. They just had all these little. They were just everything was independent. There really wasn't much for chain truck stops. It was like, a local, got fuel from the co-op and they'd sell it and sell just these little homey little truck stops. Oh man. Good. Well, moving along, I guess to tie back a little bit into last week's adventures, we dealt with a lot of roads again this week. In fact, we dealt with a couple different scenarios that made me start to think about what should a guy do, what should a guy not do.
I want to jump in again because it just came to mind. You're talking about these are the good old boy stuff that used to be in South Dakota. We got a question from someone this week who said, what happened to the good old boy? I don't know if they said that exactly, but CB lingo.
Yep.
Since you're talking about good old boy stuff.
Yes. So what happened? I have a great CB voice, by the way.
CB is first, maybe for those who don't know what a CB is.
The Citizens Band.
So most all semis, every semi?
It used to be, yeah. It used to be. So it used to be back in the day that all semis had CBs. And truck stops would have long-range CBs to talk out to truckers, give them road reports. It was like everybody lived and breathed and died by the CB, So every truck had one in it. And in fact, it's hard to find them. There was custom shops where you could stop. A guy would have his cargo van set up in the parking lot. And there's still a couple of them around the country, but you could take your CB out and he would dissect it and put more powerful, components in it, little amplifiers, and to take your truck CB and really juice it up and make them pretty neat. And every truck had them and everyone used them to communicate. So if there was maybe a DOT guy on the side of the road 10 miles ahead of you, someone would get on the CB and say, hey man, just a heads up, there's a DOT. So if you needed to, get squared away, you could pull over for a minute, get things checked. And everyone communicated, or if roads were bad, or if there was a pileup, for example. This is another thing people dog on about these pileups. They're like, well, if everyone had a CB, you could warn the trucks way ahead of time, like, hey, there's a pileup. You might as well get off now because you're going to be stuck on the freeway. They're going to shut it down. So all these CBs, and along with those CBs came, lingo. And I'm young enough that I'm not really I've got a good breaker 19. You got your ears on. Come on, that's my CB voice, Loomis.
So breaker 19, channel 19.
Yeah, and I'm really not. In fact, we should get somebody on sometime as a guest that could break down the old lingos a little better. I know the old basic stuff, but. And Rooster might remember what some of this more specifically.
No, I was the worst CB guy. I always had the cheapest, most worst with a CB.
It's true.
Most of the time I could yell out the window and do better than with my CB.
So, but they had this old lingo, like for just some basics, like law enforcement, you call them bears. So, there are a DOT, there's a bear. A full-grown bear would be a DOT officer. A bear would be a highway patrol. But a full-grown bear, because highway patrol is probably not going to inspect you. They're just more worried about speed. A full-grown bear is, a DOT that's going to inspect you. Rather than calling them a scale, they call them a coop. The coop's open, coop's closed. Chicken coop's open, chicken coop's closed. They had all just these nicknames and terms, and it's a shame because it's not like 10 years ago everybody quit using CBs. I'm 36 and I know very little of the lingo because it was that many years that it was segueing out. But it's just gotten to where when it boils down to it, companies just quit emphasizing the importance of having CBs in their trucks. These big fleet companies that have taken over the roads. That's the bulk of the trucks you see are big companies. They don't see the value in teaching their drivers, this is a CB. You use this to communicate anything you see, anything going on, talk to other guys. They don't even put them in the truck. So if you want a CB and you drive for a big company, chances are you got to buy it with your own money and put it in your truck. And some of them guys do. But it's kind of sad because sometimes you really there's information you need to convey. And you get on, hey, westbound, you got your ears on? That's another one. Do you got your ears on? Nothing. Basically, as a general rule of thumb, you guys, if you drive a van and you have a CB, you're awesome. But general rule is all cattle trucks will have a radio. Every single cattle truck will have a CB. I would say the majority of flatbed trucks will have a CB. The majority of reefer trucks, the refrigerated units, will have CBs. Heavy haul guys will have them, but the majority of trucks you see on the road are van trailers, and none of them hardly have CBs. So it's frustrating. But anyway, that's I think that's why it died. Just to answer that question.
Do you think cell phones had any instance of those going away?
Yes, they did. Because, in fact, I'm glad you brought that up. That's another part of it, is because people now to communicate, like you used to not have any, like the only way you could talk to somebody was through the CB. And I remember Rooster, when I was young, if you're going the same direction as someone, you might start a conversation as you're both going across I-90 in South Dakota. Just chat, and it's not necessarily trucking talk. It's just, hey man, where are you from? Like, you just get to know people that way. And I remember the one that sticks out. I remember at the very end of where we were about to split off, Dad and this other guy pulled over just to shake hands and meet, and the guy gave us a bunch of fruit candy. He's like, "Oh, I love these. Here's for your kids, whatever." So that always sticks in my mind. But there was a lot of that. And so when cell phones came out, you get bored. You put your headset on and start chatting with friends at home or calling other people. So yeah, and social media has done the same thing. Even at night at the truck stops, everybody just holes up in their truck, does their social media, does their movies, whatever, rather than getting out and wandering around and chatting with each other and swapping stories or going into the restaurant and having dinner. And it's all gone.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a pretty long interjection. So back to your bad road stories.
So we encountered like 1, 2, 3. I had 3 semis in this past week that all encountered a road closed. Now there's like soft road closures and there's hard road closures. Soft would be where, they put an advisory out and say it's closed. Just best not go out there. Or there's a hard closure where they actually have a barricade that comes down and blocks the road, where they're like a railroad arm that crosses the railroad tracks. Anyway, so I had these 3 instances, and they all 2 of them chose the same, and 1 of them chose a different, and they all had good outcomes. But let's see, the first guy, he was coming back to Montana, and the weather was really nice, and I'm not sure, I still don't know why they had the road closed. But he's a farmer. He's pretty hardcore, young guy, really capable, good trucker. Carries big 3-rail chains, meaning that his chains wrap around all of his wheels not just a single wheel. I mean, he's loaded for bear and ready to rip when he gets into some bad situations. So he came to a road closed sign out on 212, but just made no sense to him. And he's checking weather cameras and everything looks good. Still wondering if it was an accident or what. But he drove around it and went on his way and no snow, no nothing. I still don't know what was going on there. But my other two guys, they were loaded and they fought and they had horrible roads. They came all the way up into Montana with these two loads out of Utah, and they are an hour away from the chute. An hour away down at Judith Gap or at Harlowtown, and they shut the road off. And they're going, what do you think? What would you do? What should you do? And again, hearkening back to last week's episode where I said analyze what's going on. Yes, they were loaded, which is vital, but it was a fairly short haul, and the cattle were really loosely loaded. So the cattle had tons of room in there. It wasn't extremely cold. It was just wintry. So I said, I think you should heed the sign. It was a hard shutdown. They had a barricade. I said, I wouldn't go around it. Because at times, if you do go around the road closed signs, it doesn't always go as well as you might think. And I'll tell you this one story, and then I'll let Rooster jump in. I had a gal that was trucking for me. She was she's probably 20, 24, 25. She had her own truck, and she was very capable, very good. She trucked for me, and then she moved on to another outfit when she moved out of state. And she called one night and told me a story that she had where she was hauling cattle down to Utah over a notorious pass in Montana we have called Monida Pass. And Monida is one of those mountain passes that's deceiving because it's not like a pass in Oregon or western Montana or Washington where you like climb up a hill and then you down. Monida Pass is like this, you're constantly climbing and you don't really know if you're climbing or not. You're like, I'm going uphill, but you can just go uphill for miles and miles. And it's the same way going down. It's just this big, it's like the world's most gradual pass. But Monida has this ability to get unbelievable snow, enough to where they double stack their reflectors. So the reflectors are like 8 feet tall on the side of the road because they can get buried in snow in the winter. So anyway, she was hauling cows down. She had a load, and it was cows that needed to get off the trailer, and they closed the road, and she went around it and drove up over Monida Pass. She had to chain up and everything. Well, she thought, this is great, I made it. But when she got to the other side, on the Idaho side, Montana guys had radioed the Idaho enforcement, and they were there waiting for her at the Idaho closure. And she ended up, it's a pretty hefty fine. I think it ended up being several $100s. And she's like, well, I was loaded. What else am I going to do? These cattle are going to be stuck out here in this blizzard for 2 days. And so, but they didn't take that into consideration. They went ahead and slapped her with a pretty hefty fine. So I was thinking back to that story when my two guys were like, what should we do? I was like, I don't want any tickets. I don't want any trouble. You're so close. Cattle are loose. They're in good shape. They'll open the road in 6 hours and you can just putt through there. And that's what they did, and they were fine. But old Rooster has tempted fate a time or two with the road closures.
I have.
You've encountered like gazillions of road closures over the years. I mean, you've had...
And I a lot of times will abide the road closed, but at times I haven't. One in particular, my brother Lyle's a cattle buyer. He had a couple loads of calves bought on the west side of the mountains, and so I got Billy Jack, and Lyle was going to jump in with us and go help us load. And we debated whether to go up through Browning to take the northern route through the lower part of the park, or to go to Missoula and up.
Either way you go, you have to climb over a pass, right?
Yeah.
It's just which one's going to be worse.
Yeah. And the weather wasn't that bad. So we decided to go north to Browning. As soon as we got to Depuyer, and this country probably, wouldn't you say this is the windiest area in the world?
Yeah.
The east slopes of the Rockies can be beyond belief. So we got to Depuyer, and they have signs in the middle of the road saying road closed. And we need to get these cattle, so we decided to ignore the road closed. So we went around it, and the road was totally dry. There's a lot of snow, blowing snow. as we got a little further, I was in the lead. Lyle and Billy Jack were behind me, and the finger drifts kept getting a little bigger and a little bigger. And
What are finger drifts?
yeah, a lot of times little fingers of snow will come across the road and get taller and taller, and you'll blow through them. You might have dry road again for another mile. It depends on terrain and fence posts and trees.
So they get caused. These little drifts get caused by like if there's a tall clump of grass on the side of the road that didn't get mowed, that'll create a windbreak, and the snow will start drifting behind it across the road, right?
Yep, little fingers, and they kept getting bigger. And we had the CBs. I said, man, it's pretty good fingers. I'm hitting them pretty hard. They're really rocking me.
And they're behind you, so they can't really feel the fingers because you're breaking the drifts.
Yeah,
open.
when they get to them, they're just completely flat.
Okay.
So we keep rolling.
And a reminder real quick, this is old Rooster, you guys, in a spring ride 1980 Freightliner cab over out there just busting them drifts wide open.
With a truck pulling a trailer.
Yep, with a straight truck and a pup. Yep.
So we come to a little hill that goes up, and it just all of a sudden it is pure ice. And because the wind's blowing so hard, I'm probably only going 40 or 45. I didn't have the momentum I need. So I start up the hill, and I start to spin out.
Now,
so,
at this point, you're past the road closure.
oh, wait.
You're like
30, 40
you're
miles.
into the deep.
Oh, yeah. We're almost to Browning.
Okay. So you're no man's land. No one's coming to help you.
No.
You're in the outlaw territory.
So I can see there's no way I'm getting close to the top. I mean, I'm grabbing gears, doing every trick I can think of. And so I said, hey, I'm spinning out. I'm going to try and get to the side of the road here. You better try and get in behind me. And Bill, because I had the road broke, he had a little more speed. He said, I think I can make it. So he pulls out and passes me when I'm spun out on the right-hand side of the road. He gets past me about 2 truck lengths and spins out. But now he's on the other side of the road. So we got both sides covered pretty well. And it is so slick, and the wind is howling. So we get stopped on Bill's. My side of the road, it's a fairly gradual borrow pit. On Bill's side, it's just straight down, big old ravine.
Just
there.
deep and steep.
Yeah.
Oh.
So he gets stopped, and
So you weren't able to get back in line. Like you've basically shut the road. I mean, it's already closed, but you're
Officially closed
You've
their
officially
road. No,
closed
we've hard
someone
closed
could
it.
get by me and then circle back, because he's a couple truck lengths in front of me. So
they
there's
could
a
do
way
a little
to get
zigzag,
by.
but you
Yeah.
okay.
So Bill's just freaking, and he gets stopped. He said, my truck's still moving. He's starting to slide down with all of his brakes.
Sliding backwards down
Sliding
the hill.
backwards and sideways a little bit.
No.
So
No.
he stops, and everything's okay for him. Then he lets out another scream. So they're moving again. So we get all of our chains out and drag him over to his truck and just pile them behind his wheels.
Like to chalk the wheels,
kind
kind
of to chalk him with these chains. And the wind's blowing so hard, we're standing on the highway. We don't even take a step. We just blow up and down.
The wind's just blowing you on
you're
your
standing
feet.
like you're standing, and I mean, it's unbelievable.
So if anyone thinks that's an exaggeration, come on up here about from now till March, April,
Yep.
and go hang out between Browning and DePuyter and see if that's an exaggeration.
It's unbelievable.
70 to 100 mile an hour winds are just the name of the game up there.
You hear every single year of trucks blowing over there.
Yep.
Every year.
Yeah, and this is the same for you guys that maybe have been here in the past. This is Highway 89 that takes you up to Glacier Park if you're going to visit Glacier on the east side. Oh. So you're blowing. You can't even get there to get these chains piled up hardly.
We have to crawl on our hands and knees. We're crawling, dragging those chains. Then we get him behind his wheels. Then to get back to my truck, we just stand up and the wind
slide
just
you back.
blows us straight back to it. So we get him chalked, and he's in there, and he said, I think with my brake set, if I push on the brake pedal, it helps a little bit. So he's still sitting in his seat. Me and Lyle, if I say, we're just going to get some sleep.
Because you were in a spot where you're feeling good.
Yeah, my wheels are off the
you're
road
good.
and
So
the
you got
grass
some
a
traction.
little bit. I'm not moving. So Bill's on the CB, and about every half hour he lets out another little squeal. So I think I'm moving again.
Now I got to ask about Lyle because Lyle's the wild card here. So Lyle was with Bill into the thick of it, and then as soon as it became apparent that Bill's truck was kind of in the danger zone, Lyle bailed out to come spend the night with you.
Yeah, he came back to
okay.
Old Blue. So we're in there trying to sleep, and finally I just have to turn the CB down.
You wouldn't even listen to the squeals?
No, I couldn't listen to it any longer. I said, Bill, I don't think the pushing on the brake probably doesn't lock them any tighter, and they're already locked. I said. So anyway, daylight comes and it's sunny and the wind dies down a little, and here comes a highway patrolman.
Oh.
He comes up and he's madder than a hornet.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
going to a wreck. He said, I've got to get to a wreck. When I get back here, if these trucks are still here, you're getting tickets. So we chain up, and there's a little ranch off to the right, and we go down there, and this rancher brings his tractor up and gets us started, and we get going, and we made it across over to Kalispell, but by then we were so late that they got different trucks.
Oh,
so
no way.
Yeah, we make the whole trip for nothing.
All for nothing.
But the guy said, I can get you a couple loads of slaughter cows to Missoula. So he said the best way to get to this ranch, he chose a shortcut. So Lyle gets out and jumps on a plane, flies back to Great Falls. He really bails.
Lyle I think Lyle, he will not stick with you he just bailing out.
Yeah.
He flew out.
He had some friend in a little private plane. He'd load cattle somewhere else. So we take this little road kind of through the mountains, and we get up there 3 or 4 miles. And also, after we got through with no tickets, we're just vowing to each other, we will never go through another road closed sign in our life. This has been a nightmare. You guys have no idea how stressful that night was. So we're just saying, I can't believe we're still alive. We're never going through another road closed. This little mountain pass, we get going, road closed sign.
And did you hold true to this new blood pact that you and Billy Jack made?
No, we
didn't.
You will. We did not.
You did not. It lasted for about 10 hours.
Yeah. So
we'll never go through another one until for the rest of the night.
Till the next one.
So then we cross, and it turns out they were doing some kind of weird construction on a bridge. So you had to cross a creek with these semis, a little creek, and then a real nasty little curve. And because of I'm broke in the middle, so I can go way better than most semis. So I made it around no problem. Bill went out as far as he could, and he said, just closed his eyes, and he said, I know my trailer was hammered against that cliff on that tight corner.
Didn't want to watch it.
No.
It's like, no. And this was all just so you could get a little load back to Missoula.
Yeah,
so
from Kalispell to Missoula.
Which is like 90 miles.
And these cows are all dyers. I mean, they're all old, thin, dying cows. And I think we lost 3 or 4
in that short trip.
Yeah, in that 100-mile haul. It was. Yeah, so you guys do not go around or through road closed signs.
That's Rooster's official advice.
Yeah.
Until the next one.
Until the next one.
Unless you
go around until the next one.
Oh man, I tell you what, that going, I can sympathize a little bit with Bill, because that going backwards, sliding backwards down a hill, it's the most. It's just like out of control. I just have no control over what's going to happen to me. I had loaded some cattle in my old Peterbilt cab over. They were going to the sale barn here in Montana, and it was a split load where I load at one place, and then I go to the next place and top off, finish out the load, and then go to the sale barn. And as I'm going, this was in the spring, and as I'm going into this second place, this was over by Great Falls, going into Big Stone Colony. You know that big hill? You go through by the school. And then
yeah.
Yep. So
I've been stuck there many times.
You've been stuck there? Well, okay. So like father, like son. And in a cab over nonetheless. So I'm getting close to this colony, this Hooterette colony where I'm loading milk cows. And just get this weird Montana springtime wet, where it just very localized, 6 inches of snow in like an hour. And I'm like, I should be all right. So I go and I start up this hill, and I make it halfway up the hill. And it's the same. It's on this side of the hill, it's up. There's a hill going up, and on this side, it's the same. It's just steep and deep. And I mean, if you went off of it, you'd just roll right off the side. You wouldn't even slide down it. You'd just tip over and go down. And I start up, and I get about halfway up, and I start spinning, and I'm like, oh, that's uncomfortable. And so I'm like, it's okay. I've got chains. So I do the responsible thing. As soon as I start spinning out, I stop. And I go to put my chains on, and as I put my chains on, basically what you do is you wrap them over the tire, and then you have to back up a little bit so the chain will go underneath the tire, and then you can hook the chains up. And this one I knew I was in a little trouble. I go to back up a little bit, like up 2 feet you got to back up or less, and my truck just starts sliding down the hill way past the chains. Just rolls over the entire chain, starts going down the hill backwards, and I'm like, and I'm hitting my brakes and nothing. And I couldn't. I finally got it to stop for a second. And any time that I would try to do anything with chains, the truck would break loose and just slide another 10 feet down the hill. And you can't steer it. You can't do anything because if you let off the brakes, it's so slick, you can't steer anyway. And it starts to go, the trailer starts to go towards the edge. And I've got the road blocked, and I'm just sitting here like, all this for like a $600 load, And finally those guys, because I'd called them, they're like, we'll come with the tractor when we can. And I'm like, no, you got to be here soon, because if you don't, I'm eventually going to go off the edge, and that will be the end. And I got out and looked, and my cattle, it was a steep enough hill, all my cattle had piled into the back of the belly, and they were all laying on each other, because it was a mess. But they finally brought a big old tractor, and they even were spinning with the tractor, and we were hopping, but we got up the hill. But I can sympathize with the screams of Bill, because I was screaming to nobody because I had no one to tell. Had I had somebody parked next to me, I would have probably been doing the same, but it's uncomfortable.
I hope I wouldn't have shut my CB off, JJ, if I was there with you.
I know. Father. And you were Bill's mentor, so you were, it probably pained your heart a little bit to just
a little
shut
bit
him
probably.
Sorry, Bill. We didn't cover this in Mentorship 202. Anyway.
We need to get Bill in here if we can.
Yeah.
So we can relive a couple of these unbelievable
It's probably more than one episode sit down for that. Maybe just sit down and record multiple hours.
Yeah, I think that's another guest tease. We've talked about Weston coming in to talk about some early trucking stuff with me. Dad and Bill were thick as thieves and went through the war, so to speak, and I think that'd be good. We'll try to get that in and just sit down and let the stories flow, and then we'll break it into sections for you. But you guys you'll really enjoy that. We teased old Billy Jack, and you'll get to meet him here one of these times.
Cool thing is, Bill's son rolls with you now.
Right. So 5-6 years ago, his son hit me up and said, well, I think he's farming too, to subsidize his operation. He goes, I think we might as well make this a 2-generation deal. And so we started trucking together and doing the same thing. Although none of our stories are not quite as epic as some of Dad and Bill's. Oh man. Yeah, that's going to be a good one. There's so many little teasers I want to tell, but I'm not. I'm just going to wait because we need to let them just flow natural from the source.
Well, good. Well, I think we're about out of time. A couple things. We are doing this podcast paying out of pocket for it. Obviously, you never hear us talk about sponsors or anything, so there's some costs involved. So we are doing a couple things to maybe take the sting out of it if anyone is interested.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting some shirts made. We'll show you more of those.
And they're cool. They turned out really good.
I think we're going to do maybe like some winter hats, like beanies, some things, I try and do the things that I wear.
Yeah. I wonder if we could start selling truck tire chains with our name on it or something after all this chain up talk.
Yeah. So look for those. We'll probably put some pictures up on Instagram. Working on a website where some of that can come, or where people can come to look at it. And if you feel so inclined, order something.
Yeah.
So that's coming up. If you need to get a hold of us, Steady at the Wheel Podcast, gmail.com. Steady at the Wheel Podcast on Instagram. Jackson's YouTube page.
Yep, Wild Wild West on YouTube and on Instagram. You know what? This is the second episode since I forgot to tell everybody what a shumanush is. I remember I said I was going to say that, and I never did. So I'm going to just take a minute real quick, and I'm going to tell you what a shumanush is. It's actually not no, it is a thing. It was a club, you guys. So a shumanush it wasn't like a thing. It wasn't an object. It was a club. So when I was like in 4th grade, I've always been pretty good at making up names, and I give a lot of nicknames out and things. And I came up with this word Shumanush when I was 10 years old and decided I was going to make a club. Seeing over at Rooster's old feedlot, just across the road from here, where we used to load all the hogs and stuff out of, he had this old rundown, what'd you call those? Like you put feed in them?
It used to be a
like,
self-feeder.
like an old grain feeder. Now all the self-feeders are made out of metal and stuff. Back in the day, they'd just make them out of wood. And there's basically a hatch in the top, and you'd pour grain down in there, and then it would self-feed grain to the cattle in the pen. And it was long abandoned in my youth, and so we turned it into this club, the Shumanush Club. And what did our club do? Not much other than hang out in the cool fort, and we'd collect dead animal bones and hang up on the walls. Looking back now on the, if you saw it from the outside looking in, you might be like, what? Because all the cow skulls and pig skulls and hip bones and just bones. But that was like what we had to decorate with. There wasn't anything else to decorate with. Bones worked. So that was Shumanush Club. So when I got my first email address in 6th grade, of course I made it Shumanush at Yahoo or whatever the email was back in the day. And then when my Instagram started, back when it was just me and a couple family members, it was Shumanush. And I didn't ever think that it would be a name that people would ever need to know. And now there's people that know of Shumanush. So that's the explanation. So Shumanush can be a club. It can be a frame of mind now. Just kind of whatever you want it to be, so long as it's positive.
My favorite memory of Shumanush is poor Kenzie. It was her lifelong goal as a young child.
Kenzie's our sister.
Yeah, younger sister.
To become a full-fledged member of the Shumanush. But she never made it. She didn't come up with the proper bones or skulls or whatever. She was just an apprentice member.
Yeah.
She never was a partner.
Mm-hmm. But we did let her roll with us all the time. Good stuff. So you can find me on Instagram at Shumanush, and that's why it is what it is. That's probably a big letdown to everybody. But anyway, yep, that's that.
All right.